The words hit me before the meaning did. Destiny. I think it's best if you leave. My father's voice carried across the dining room, with the same cold precision he used in closing arguments. The crystal chandelier above seemed to dim. Or maybe that was just my vision narrowing. I felt my fingers tighten around the stem of my wine glass, until the fragile bowl threatened to crack. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The applause that followed was thin. Nervous. But my father's smile was triumphant. He raised his glass to the room. To the donors. To the future voters who had no idea they were cheering for a man who had just publicly executed his own daughter. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I simply reached into my clutch and pressed the small red button on my phone. The recording app had been running for the last 5 minutes. My professional instinct kicked in before the personal pain could paralyze me. I'm an investigative journalist. I've spent the last 6 years uncovering corporate fraud, exposing lies, and giving a voice to people who've been silenced. But tonight, I wasn't just a reporter. I was the story. The room murmured. The sound of polite society pretending not to notice a family imploding. I stood up. My chair scraped against the marble floor. A harsh sound that cut through the low hum of conversation. My husband, Trevor, was already on his feet beside me. His hand found the small of my back. A warm anchor in a room that felt freezing. We're leaving, he said. His voice low but firm enough for the people at our table to hear. My father didn't even look at us. He was already laughing at something a donor said. His back turned. His point made. I was dismissed. Erased. Just like always. But as we walked toward the exit, I didn't feel the shame he wanted me to feel. I felt something else. Clarity. Cold. Sharp clarity. For years, I'd played the role of the silent prop in his political theater. The dutiful daughter who smiled in photos but wasn't allowed to speak. The black sheep who was tolerated only as long as she remained invisible. Tonight, he'd made a mistake. He'd forgotten that the silent daughter sees everything. And the one thing you never do to a journalist is give her a lead. I glanced down at my phone. The red light was still blinking. Every dismissive laugh. Every murmur of assent from his wealthy friends. It was all there. Captured. Trevor opened the car door for me. His face tight with anger. Are you okay? He asked. Sliding into the driver's seat. I'm fine, I said. And it wasn't a lie. The tears that usually came after these encounters were absent. Instead, my mind was racing. Cataloging. Planning. He can't keep doing this to you. Destiny, Trevor said. Starting the engine. Humiliating you in front of half the state's elite. It's sick. He won't, I replied, staring out the window at the receding lights of the estate. Because I'm done being the daughter who takes it. I'm done being the background character in his campaign. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had walked into that ballroom an hour ago. That woman had hoped for a miracle. This woman was looking for a microphone. Drive, I said. We have work to do. My father thought he was silencing me. He thought he was protecting his image. But all he'd really done was hand me the opening scene of the most important story I would ever write. And this time, I wasn't going to bury the lead. The silence of our apartment was heavier than the noise of the gala. When Trevor locked the door behind us, the adrenaline that had sustained me through the drive finally evaporated, leaving behind a cold, aching exhaustion. I sat on the edge of our secondhand sofa, kicking off the heels that had cost me a week's salary just to fit in at a table where I wasn't wanted. I looked around the room. It was clean, cozy, and entirely ours. But the shadows seemed to stretch longer tonight. My eyes landed on the small, battered filing cabinet in the corner. I didn't need to open it to know what was in the bottom drawer. The student loan statements. The ones I'd been paying off for 7 years. $250,000. That was the number. That was the legacy my grandmother had left specifically for my education. She had shown me the papers when I was 16. Her hands shaking but her eyes bright. She wanted me to be free. She wanted me to write without worrying about rent. But when the tuition bills arrived for my freshman year, the account was empty. My father had sat me down in his study, the one with the mahogany desk that cost more than my car, and told me there had been market fluctuations. He said investments were complicated. He said I needed to be resilient, to pull myself up by my bootstraps. He handed me a loan application instead of a check. I believed him. I took out the loans. I worked double shifts at a coffee shop while studying journalism. I ate ramen and skipped heating in the winter. 6 months later, my brother Tyler launched his tech startup. It was a flimsy idea for a social media app that never worked. But it had seed funding. $250,000 of seed funding. I knew the math. I knew where the money had gone. But for a decade, I had said nothing. Trevor sat down beside me, handing me a glass of water. "Why didn't you tell him off sooner?" he asked gently. "Why did we go tonight?" It was the question I had been asking myself since we left the ballroom. Why did I endure it? Why did I keep going back to a well that I knew was poisoned? I realized then that I had been living inside a psychological mechanism I'd researched for stories but never applied to myself. It's called the trap of normalization. When you grow up in a house where love is a currency and cruelty is a teaching method, you don't recognize abuse when it happens. You don't see the theft of your future as a crime. You see it as a family tax. My father didn't wake up one day and decide to be a monster. He eroded my boundaries slowly, grain by grain. Over 20 years. He normalized the idea that Tyler's dreams were investments, and mine were hobbies. He normalized the dynamic where Jessica was the fixer, Tyler was the star, and I was the spare parts inventory they raided whenever they needed something. I had accepted the unacceptable because it was familiar. I had mistaken his control for parenting. I had thought that if I just shrank enough, if I cost them nothing, eventually I would be worth something to them. But tonight, when he dismissed me in front of his donors, the illusion finally broke. I wasn't staying silent to keep the peace. I was staying silent to protect his theft. I looked at Trevor. I went tonight because I thought I could get the truth by asking for it. I said, my voice steadying, "But men like my father don't give you the truth. You have to take it." I stood up and walked over to my desk. I didn't open the filing cabinet. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life. A stark white light in the dim room. I wasn't going to sue him. A lawsuit would take years. And he had lawyers who played golf with the judges. I wasn't going to scream at him in private anymore. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to investigate. I pulled up a blank document. At the top, I didn't write "Dear Diary." I typed 2 words, Episode 1. The trap of normalization relies on silence to work. It relies on the victim believing they are alone, that their reality is the only reality. But I had a microphone. I had a platform. And I had the one thing my father had always underestimated. I had the receipts. "I'm not going to bed," I told Trevor. He looked at the laptop, then at me, and nodded. He knew that look. It was the look I got when a story was finally breaking. "I'll make coffee," he said. I sat down and placed my hands on the keyboard. The silence in the room wasn't heavy anymore. It was expectant. The architecture of my silence was coming down, brick by brick, and I was going to broadcast the demolition to the world. The next morning, The sun hit the kitchen table with a cheerful indifference that felt almost insulting. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. I wasn't drinking it. I was watching my phone screen light up with the precision of a coordinated airstrike. I had expected silence. Maybe a cold shoulder. Maybe, in some naive corner of my heart, a hesitant apology text. Instead, I got a Google alert. Local senatorial hopeful's daughter suffers mental health episode at charity gala. I tapped the link. The article was on a popular local gossip blog. The kind that pretended to be news, but was really just a mouthpiece for people with enough money to buy the narrative. The source was listed as a concerned family insider. I read the copy. It was masterful. It described me not as an investigative journalist, but as a troubled young woman struggling with the pressures of her family's public life. It framed my father's cruelty as tough love, and my exit as a hysterical flight. I didn't need to guess who the source was. The phrasing had Jessica's fingerprints all over it. My sister. The PR crisis manager. The fixer. She hadn't just spun the story, she had weaponized my own emotions to discredit me before I could even open my mouth. If I spoke up now, I wouldn't be a whistleblower, I'd just be the crazy daughter off her meds. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. We love you. Destiny. But we can't support this instability. Get help. Or we cut you off completely. No contact until you're well. It was the perfect paper trail. If anyone looked at his phone, he was the concerned patriarch. To me, the message was clear. Shut up. Or, you're dead to us. Trevor walked into the kitchen. I saw the article on my screen, and his face went dark. We need a lawyer, he said. His voice hard. This is libel. We can sue them for defamation. No, I said. The word came out flat and calm. A lawsuit takes years. It happens in closed rooms, with sealed depositions. They have the money to bury us in paperwork until we're bankrupt. I stood up and walked to the window. Down on the street. People were going to work. Living their lives. Completely unaware that a war had just been declared in a penthouse 3 miles away. They want a legal battle. I told Trevor. They want me to play defense. They want me to spend the next 6 months proving I'm sane, while they scrub the financial records. I turned back to the table. I'm not going to sue them. Trevor. I'm going to broadcast them. I walked into my home office. It used to be a guest room we barely used. A place for boxes and spare linens. Now, it was a war room. I cleared the desk. I pulled out the corkboards I used for mapping complex fraud cases. I pinned up the gala invitation. Next to it, I pinned the printout of the gossip article. Then, I pinned the bank statement from 10 years ago, the one showing a zero balance where my tuition should have been. They were trying to destroy my credibility. They were using the oldest trick in the book, call a woman crazy so no one listens to her truth. It was a whisper campaign designed to suffocate me. But they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just a woman they could bully at the dinner table anymore. I was a professional storyteller. And I knew that the only way to kill a whisper is with a scream. I set up my microphone. I adjusted the pop filter. I opened the audio software on my laptop and created a new project file. I didn't name it Family Drama. I named it The Silent Witness. I wasn't writing a diary entry. I was scripting a true crime investigation. And the suspect was my own father. I put on my headphones. The silence of the room was absolute. I leaned into the mic, took a breath, and hit record. Everyone thinks they know the price of a seat at the high table. I said, my voice steady. Professional. Lethal. But let me tell you what it actually costs. It costs you your voice. It costs you your future. And in the Harper family, it costs exactly $250,000. I watched the waveforms spike on the screen, dancing in jagged green lines. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Let Jessica spin her stories. Let Dad send his threats. I was live. The upload bar hit 100% at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I didn't announce it to my family. I didn't send a link to the group chat. I simply tweeted the link to my dormant professional account with a single caption: the cost of admission. By noon, The Silent Witness was trending locally. By 5 p.m., it had broken into the top 50 podcasts nationwide. The hook was undeniable. I had opened the episode with the raw audio from the gala. The clinking of crystal. The murmurs of the donors. And then, my father's voice. Crisp and cruel, Destiny. I think it's best if you leave. I stripped away the context of a daughter being scolded and presented it as what it really was: a politician silencing a creditor. I laid out the timeline. The trust fund. The market fluctuations. The coincidence of my brother's startup funding hitting his account 3 days after my tuition check bounced. I didn't sound crazy. I sounded like an auditor. But just as the comments section began to fill with strangers, validating my math, my phone buzzed with a notification from Signal. It was an encrypted message from a burner number. You have the timeline right. You have the motive wrong. Parking garage on 4th and Main. Level 3. Midnight. Come alone. My investigative brain overrode my survival instinct. I grabbed my keys and my recorder. The parking garage was a concrete ribcage. Cold and echoing. I parked my sedan in the shadows, keeping the engine running for a moment. Scanning the area. A black SUV sat idling 3 spots away. The window rolled down. I expected a disgruntled former campaign manager. I expected a political rival looking to twist the knife. I didn't expect the woman who stepped out of the car, wrapped in a trench coat that cost more than my entire apartment setup. Jessica. My sister. The fixer. The woman who had painted me as a mental patient less than 48 hours ago. I stepped out of the car, leaving the door open. Is this a trap? I asked, my voice echoing off the concrete. Did Dad send you to offer a settlement? Or are you just here to diagnose me in person? Jessica didn't sneer. She didn't put on her PR smile. She looked exhausted. The kind of bone-deep fatigue that makeup couldn't hide. She reached into her pocket, and I tensed, ready to bolt. She pulled a flash drive. He didn't send me, she said, tossing the drive to me. I caught it, the plastic cold against my palm. He thinks I'm at the office drafting a cease and desist. You called me unstable, I said, gripping the drive. You fed the press a story that I was off my meds. I bought you time, Jessica countered, her voice flat. If he thought you were a threat, he would have frozen your assets and filed an injunction before you could hit record. By painting you as hysterical, I made him underestimate you. He thought you were having a tantrum. He didn't know you were building a case. I stared at her, trying to find the lie. Why? Because I'm tired. Destiny. She leaned against her SUV, the perfect posture finally slumping. I'm tired of cleaning up the men's messes. I'm tired of balancing the books so Tyler can play CEO and Dad can play senator. She pointed to the drive in my hand. You think he stole your tuition to fund Tyler's startup because he loves Tyler more? It's worse. I looked down at the drive. What is this? It's the ledger, she said. The real one. The $250,000 wasn't just theft. It was laundering. My breath hitched. Laundering. Illegal campaign contributions. Jessica explained, reciting it like a grocery list. He moved the money from your trust, cycled it through the family charity foundation to make it look like a donation, and then funneled it into the campaign war chest. Tyler's startup was just a shell to hide the transaction fees. The world tilted. This wasn't just a toxic family dynamic anymore. This wasn't just a civil suit over stolen inheritance. This was federal wire fraud. This was tax evasion. This was prison time. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "This implicates you too. You manage the PR for the foundation. Look at the metadata on the files," she said, turning back to her car. "My digital signature isn't on a single approval. I made sure of that years ago. I've been waiting for someone to light the match. I just didn't think it would be you." She opened her car door, the interior light casting harsh shadows on her face. "Don't waste it," she said. "And Destiny, when you drop this episode, don't miss." She drove away, leaving me standing in the exhaust fumes, holding enough evidence to bury the entire Harper dynasty in my hand. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the executioner, and my sister had just handed me the axe. The drive back from the parking garage was a blur of neon lights and racing thoughts. I had the smoking gun in my pocket, a piece of plastic smaller than a stick of gum that held the power to topple a dynasty. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a confession, or at least a demonstration of character so undeniable that no amount of PR spin could scrub it clean. I got back to the apartment at 12:45 a.m. Trevor was awake, pacing the living room. When he saw my face, he didn't ask questions. He just moved to the side, ready to support whatever play I was about to run. I went straight to my desk. I plugged in the flash drive. I opened the files. It was all there. The transfers, the shell companies, the dates that aligned perfectly with my tuition bills and Tyler's failed ventures. I didn't upload them. Not yet. Instead, I started a new stream. No title. No intro music. Just an open line. I knew he was coming. Jessica had bought me time. But Bradley Harper wasn't a man who waited for the morning news. He was a man who handled his problems in the dark. At 1:15 a.m., the pounding started. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the heavy, entitled fist of a man who owned the building, even if his name wasn't on the deed. Trevor moved to answer it, but I shook my head. "I've got this," I said. I opened the door. My father stood in the hallway. He looked like a caricature of himself. The bespoke suit was wrinkled, the tie loosened, his hair chaotic. He smelled of scotch and desperation. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like a giant. He looked like a man standing on a trap door. "Let me in," he rasped. He pushed past me without waiting for an answer, his eyes darting around the small apartment as if looking for a wiretap. He didn't see the laptop on the desk in the corner. He didn't see the red on-air indicator glowing steadily on the interface. "How much?" he asked, spinning around to face me. "How much to kill the podcast? Name the number." "Destiny. I'll wire it tonight." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "It's not about money." "Everything is about money," he shouted, his composure shattering. "Don't be naive. I know about the trust fund." "Fine. I took it. I borrowed it. It was a bridge loan for the campaign. I was going to pay it back." "You were going to pay it back," I repeated, my voice flat. 10 years later, "I'll give you double," he said, stepping closer. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket. His hands were shaking. 500,000. Right now, you delete the episodes. You issue a retraction, saying you were confused, Stressed. We'll call it a medical leave. And if I don't? His eyes narrowed. The desperate father vanished, replaced by the ruthless litigator. Then you lose everything. You think you're smart, you're a blogger with a microphone. I have friends in every newsroom in this state. I will bury you. And your husband, he gestured vaguely at Trevor. I'll make sure no firm in the country hires him. I will burn your lives down to the ground. Destiny. Do not test me. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the violence of his threat. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply walked over to my desk and turned the laptop monitor around so it faced the room. The screen was a waterfall of text. Comments were scrolling so fast, they were a blur. Did he just admit to stealing the trust fund? He threatened the husband. I heard it. Sharing this to the ethics committee right now. Is this real? Is this happening live? The viewer count was in the corner, 42,000 listening. My father froze. He stared at the screen. The color draining from his face until he looked like gray ash. He realized, in that split second, that he hadn't walked into his daughter's living room. He had walked into a courtroom. And the jury was already deliberating. You're live, he whispered. It wasn't a question. For the last 10 minutes, I said, they heard the bribe. Dad. They heard the admission. And they definitely heard the threat. He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw genuine fear. Not anger. Fear. The fear of a man who realizes his control has evaporated. Destiny. Please, he said. His voice broke. Turn it off. You can keep the money, I said, my voice clear, carrying through the microphone to 42,000 witnesses. I don't want your check. I don't want your hush money. I'd rather have the truth. I walked to the door and held it open. I think it's best if you leave, I said. He looked at me one last time, a look of pure, unadulterated shock, and then he walked out. He moved like an old man. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Then I walked back to the desk. I looked at the chat, exploding with support, with validation, with justice. And I hit stop recording. The red light faded to black. But the fire I had started was just beginning to burn. The fallout wasn't a bang. It was a liquidation. By the end of the week, Bradley Harper had withdrawn from the Senate race, citing health reasons. Though everyone knew the only thing sick was his polling numbers. The authorities opened an investigation into the charity foundation, based on the files Jessica provided. Tyler's startup was seized for assets to pay back the donors my father had defrauded. The empire didn't just crumble, it was audited out of existence. Jessica resigned quietly. Because she had been the anonymous source. Her reputation survived. She sent me a text 1 week later. The books are balanced. That was the last time we spoke. And it was enough. But the real end of the story wasn't the destruction of my father. That would have been simple revenge. I wanted something more permanent. I wanted justice. When the podcast revenue checks started coming in, followed by a book advance, I looked at the balance in my account. It was more than I had ever seen. I took exactly $250,000, the precise amount of my stolen tuition, and I didn't buy a house. I didn't buy a car. I established the Truth Seeker Scholarship. It's a full-ride grant for underprivileged journalism students who want to expose corruption but can't afford the tuition. This is the difference between the justice of punishment and the justice of the sower. Punishment looks backward. It's about inflicting pain equal to what you suffered. But the sower looks forward. I took the symbol of my oppression, the money that was used to silence me, and I turned it into a microphone for the next generation. My father wanted to bury the truth. I used his money to grow a garden of truth-tellers he can never silence. That is the only victory that lasts. I'm sitting in my office now. The corkboards are down. The war room is just a room again. But the microphone is still here. And I want to speak to you. Not to the audience. But to you. The one listening to this in your car? Or in your bedroom, with the door locked. The one who feels like the black sheep. The one who has been told you're too sensitive. Too dramatic. Too much trouble. I know what it feels like to be on the edge of your own family. Looking in through a window that never opens. I know the ache of wondering why you aren't enough to be loved without conditions. I need you to know that you aren't the problem. You are the witness. You are the one with the courage to see the cracks in the portrait. They didn't push you to the edge because you were broken. They pushed you there because you were the only one strong enough to survive the fall and climb back up. You don't have to wait for an apology that will never come. You don't have to beg for a seat at a table where you're served poison. You can build your own table. You can write your own story. And if they try to silence you, hit record. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to be heard, share this with someone who needs to know they aren't crazy. And don't forget to follow for more stories about reclaiming the truth.